Well, you heard it right there. The Texans beat the Colts 20-17 to take the lead in the AFC South, one of the more hotly contested divisions in all of football. And not a bad game, really. Deshaun Watson looks good. The Colts get Jacoby Brissett back. That's obviously a big step for them. They were able to compete in this game, but Houston simply was the better team. There was no answer at all when they needed it. Will Fuller got the yards, 7 catches for 140 yards, but it was DeAndre Hopkins who just appeared more or less unguardable tonight when they wanted to get it to him when Deshaun Watson targeted him. 8 targets, 6 catches for 94 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He ended up being the difference. A terrific rushing performance by the Colts, more or less wasted. Jonathan Williams, more of a volume performance, only 4 yards a carry, but 26 carries, 104 yards. The Colts on the whole, 39 carries for $175, 2 touchdowns. They were not afraid to kind of grind it out, and Watson, in his case, throws for 298 and 2 touchdowns. So kind of 2 different approaches in this game. And Houston comes out on top. So when you look at the playoff standings, in this case, that one was one that was a big deal. Coming into this game with the tie, Indy was sitting in the 4 seed as the leaders of the South. Now, Houston jumps to that. Indy ends up in the mix, now going with the wild card, where to start off this week, there is a whole bunch of teams all in the same spot. You're running to Oakland is 6-4. Pittsburgh is 5-5. Tennessee is 5-5. Those teams could all end up one way or the other, either tied or, in the Raiders' case, ahead of Indy. So a big win, a pivotal win for the Houston Texans, an important one for them. Changes the trajectory of the season to a certain extent. So that's a big game to start off the week, and one that actually was a pretty good game. There was no part of it that was really strange. No extra drama. Nobody was scoring. There wasn't outlandish in point totals. This was just a regular-looking NFL game, which for Thursday Night Football can kind of be unusual in and of itself. But entertaining nonetheless, a good game for them. The Colorado Avalanche, while the game was going on in the NFL, ended up falling to the Minnesota Wild. 3-2, Minnesota took a 2-0 lead. The Avs stormed back 2 more goals by Cale Makar. Makar is hot, doesn't even begin to describe it, but it wasn't enough for the Avalanche. Jason Zucker gets a goal in the 3rd. That's enough for Minnesota to hop over the Avs, who are now 13-7-2. Our Avalanche insider, Adrian Dater, will join us in just about 15 minutes. We'll break down that game as well as what it means for the Avalanche as their road trip, 5-game road trip, comes to an end. Not a bad road trip. 3-2. Given the Avs' injuries, hard to really complain about that. Next on the docket will be a game at home against the Toronto Maple Leafs on Saturday. But we'll have Adrian Dater in just a little bit to break that down. Of course, the Denver Broncos have their next game against Buffalo. I'd love to say pivotal game like I did for the Thursday Night Football game. I'd love to say something like that, but it's not. It just isn't. The Broncos can be, with a win, they can get to 4-7. Again, gives them really no help in a playoff chase, really. Or 3-8. This game, much like the rest on the schedule, when it comes to playoff positioning, really doesn't matter. It's unlikely that any of them are going to matter all that much. Certainly not when it comes to however the Broncos will finish in 2019. So, knowing that the Broncos should be moving towards the 2020 season, they are in a rebuild. Now, I said this before the season even began. They were in a rebuild. Whether they want to call it a rebuild, whether they think they're in a rebuild, whether they like that they're in a rebuild, or whether they don't. They're in a rebuild. And there are players on this team that don't make a lot of sense to remain there during a rebuild. Joe Flacco's one of them. Obviously, the injury, unfortunate for him. I don't know that he'll play another snap for the Broncos at all, but we know he won't do so this year. Broncos have a lot of free agents, especially on a defense that on the whole has been pretty good, especially given the fact that it has been piecemeal at times. Whether it's shuffling around starters or whether it's making changes due to injury, the Broncos have done a good job on D. And I think we knew that this team had a pretty solid potential on defense. That was the idea. If you watch the Broncos game against the Vikings, you realize the Broncos themselves buy into that because even with an enormous lead, they basically went into a shell in the second half, assuming that the defense could handle it. And sure enough, Broncos in the top 10 in a tremendous number of defensive categories. They're fourth in total yards. It's 310.8. They're seventh in scoring, 19.7 points per game. 11th against the run, only 100.5 yards per game. Fifth against in passing yards, a meager 210.3. Holding teams to only 34.9% conversion rate on third down. That's seventh best in the league. And in red zone percentage, scoring, they're allowing only 41.4% of the times touchdowns. All those metrics look really good. Each and every one of them. The challenge, and this is something I've talked about before, I talked a little bit about it yesterday. I've also talked about it over the course of the season. Given that the rules in the NFL favor the offense, that's not a surprise. I think we all understand that. It is incumbent upon defenses, great defenses, to break games. And to break games, you have to create turnovers. You have to create big plays. Whether it's a turnover that your team ends up getting, whether it's a fumble that ends up shaking the confidence of an offense, whether it's just knocking a team backwards, they have to punt, but they have to think about it the rest of the game. That's what the Broncos have been lacking. They're 22nd in the league in sacks, and they are 30th. Tied for 30th with Cincinnati. Winless Cincinnati. The only team in the league that is winless. That's where the Broncos sit when it comes to takeaways. And you hope against a Bills team that plays maybe a bit more of a high-risk style of offense than some of the teams the Broncos have faced, there's an opportunity to turn that around a little bit. Maybe there is. But it's starting to feel week in and week out as if the Broncos don't generate turnovers, if not flat-out points, which is an enormous thing to expect of your defense. But if the Broncos don't generate that, it becomes difficult to understand where they can win. They probably should have won against the Vikings. 27-23 loss was heartbreaking. I had it at 27-16 Vikings. And I said if the Broncos didn't score points on defense, not just get picks, but score points, they wouldn't win. They didn't, and they didn't. This might be another one of those games. Buffalo is not as dangerous as Minnesota. Minnesota at 8-3, Buffalo at 7-3. Buffalo gets this win. They'd match Minnesota at 8-3. But they're not as dangerous. They're not as versatile. They're not as explosive. But they do it differently. Kirk Cousins dissected the Broncos defense in the second half last week. Josh Allen is not likely to do that. Accuracy is not his thing. Does get big plays. And he does something that Cousins doesn't do, generates yards with his feet. So the Broncos then get two dangerous teams back to back, but two dangerous teams that do things very, very differently. This defense was exposed to a certain extent by the hurry-up offense that the Vikings ran during essentially the entire second half last week. To that end, I would expect the Broncos to face that with some regularity. Yeah, the sacks have been down. They're down a lot. Broncos are a bottom third team when it comes to sacks. But people still respect it. They respect it a great deal. Kirk Cousins, following the game last week, talked about how dangerous the Broncos' pass rush is. Talking about his nervousness when it came to going into the no-huddle. Wasn't sure that was going to work entirely. Said after the game, quote, "You hesitate to do it because you know that they have Von Miller and a really good pass rush. And you don't want to get into a drop-back game with some of the best pass rushers to ever play." That's flattering, of course. But when you look at Von Miller's numbers, they stand up. Cousins did say, though, but it worked. And I don't know if that's because you run play after play after play without huddling. And they start to get a little winded, and now they don't have the same get-off as they do in the first half when you're huddling every play. I'm not sure. I'm not sure any team knows yet. But I do know that around the league, they watched the Denver Broncos blow a 20-0 halftime lead and do so in relatively brief fashion because the Vikings went no huddle, because the Vikings picked up the pace. The Broncos either weren't ready for it or weren't in shape for it or a little bit of both. Regardless, they were outmaneuvered. It's a talented defense. I'm not knocking it. It is. It's a good defense. It could be better if it was healthy. You replace Devontae Harris and Malik Reed with Bryce Callahan and Bradley Chubb. Yeah, it's a better defense, but it's good. But they look like Swiss cheese after half. Buffalo can run a creative style offense that can give the Broncos the same kind of fits. We'll talk about that over the course of the evening. But as I mentioned earlier, the Avalanche finishing their 5-game road trip. Make it exciting. Come back from a 2-0 deficit. Tie it up. Cale Makar doing his thing. Minnesota comes out on top 3-2. We'll break all of that down with our Avalanche insider, Adrian Dater, next. Colorado Avalanche finished their road trip tonight in Minnesota. They finished that road trip 3-2 after losing tonight in Minnesota. Well, 3-2. Joining us now is our Avalanche insider, Adrian Dater, brought to you by Bud Light. And AD, this game, it looked like it could have been a lot worse. Early, it looked like it was going to get out of hand, and then, well, Cale Makar showed up and did Cale Makar things.
Yeah, it was another great game for Cale Makar, Sean. It was two mighty impressive goals there in the second period, especially that second one he scored to tie it up at the 18:49 mark of the second period. Avs had all the momentum in the world going into that third period, but they kind of let it slip away. Bad goal there with 10 minutes to go, and they just couldn't get the equalizer. It was, in the end, not good enough, not complete enough game. Every time you play a really horrible first period like they did, even though they got out of it scoreless, it just set a bad precedent for the rest of the night. They tie it up, but then they kind of slip back again. It just wasn't enough consistent, hard-working effort tonight, and they probably got what they deserved in the end.
Did this seem like maybe a little bit of fatigue trying to get through that last period of a 5-game road trip? It to me seemed like maybe they just ran out of gas. And like you pointed out, they had a bad first period, and you have to expend a lot of energy to catch back up, which they did. But they almost looked gassed to me by the end of this game. Did you get the same impression?
I don't know if it's physical fatigue. It might have been a little mental fatigue. I think when you're on the road for so long like this one, you do get a little mentally tired, probably physically tired too, but I really don't think that's a good excuse, and it can't be used in this case. They had a full day off yesterday, no practice. It's time to certainly get plenty of rest for this game. It was, 2-hour flight from Calgary to here on a nice private first-class charter airplane, so fully catered meals. So no, I'm not buying that tired excuse, but I will maybe say that you just get a little mentally tired being on the road so long. I know I can speak for the writer side of it. It's like you're like, all right, let's just get this thing over with and go home. I'm looking forward to hitting that 303 soil tomorrow. Myself after 10 days on the road.
Yeah.
So maybe, but yeah, not a good enough excuse for professional hockey players paid millions of dollars.
Right. I was about to say, I'm sure you do well. I'm not sure you're doing what they do well. So, it's definitely a different thing. In our business, we're generally
not the same pay scale.
Yeah, we're not flying charter normally. They don't just invite us to do that. So,
no.
In the end, this is still a team that has won 5 out of its last 7. They are getting a little bit healthier. And let's face it, coaches are rarely happy when their team wins. They can coach when their team loses. So is there something Jared Bednar can take away from this game and use between now and Saturday when they play the Leafs?
I don't think he's going to take anything away from this game, but I do think he can take away plenty from this road trip and say, hey, pretty good job, though, guys. We still went 3-2 on the trip, despite having, at one point, third and fourth string goaltenders and 2/3 of the top line out, and then another key player goes out with a head injury, and then other guys with little dings here and there, and they still won 3 out of 5 on a 5-game road trip that was pretty good teams they played. So I think that's what he can take into it. All right, guys, let's go home. Let's have another day off in Denver. They are going to practice tomorrow in Denver, but they will have a nice day to rest up after that. Let's come out fresh for a Saturday night game against the Toronto Maple Leafs on Tyson Barrie return night. Let's make them wish they never made that trade for Nazem Kadri and company, and let's just go out and play to a good home crowd. I think that's what they can do, and I think it'll be it should be anyway a good, energetic, fun game.
We're talking with Adrian Dater. Follow him at 8dater on Twitter, ColoradoHockeyNow.com. And earlier today on Twitter, you had some updates about Gabe Landeskog, about Mikko Rantanen. Where do they stand as far as this Avs team goes? And do you have a best guess as to when we might be able to see them again?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and guess that Brandon comes back next weekend at the earliest, maybe a little bit after. But I think we're heading down that path where he's heading into the home stretch as far as skating, getting that strength back, and getting back to playing action. I think it's still going to be another week. But maybe I'll be off by a day or two. Who knows? He has been skating regularly, Brandon, and assuming he'll be out there tomorrow. So we'll get more of an update. Landeskog is going to be longer. He's going to be reevaluated on Monday with the team doctors. I don't think that's necessarily an ominous thing to say. It's not like I don't think he's had a setback. I just think he's going to. It sounds like he could be getting the leg further looked at, MRI maybe, and see how everything's healing, and then maybe they can finally give a concrete timetable after that. But I still think if I had to bet, we're talking 3 to 4 more weeks for Landy. I wouldn't be surprised if it lasts till Christmas time with him, and that's just the way it's been portrayed most of the time. It's going to be it's going to be a monthly thing. It seemed like when they first had it, and basically by Christmas it's going to be about 2 months. So let's hope I think that's what the Avs hope is, that he's back by Christmas. Hopefully it's not even longer than that, but I haven't heard that it would be. But it has been a bit of a cone of silence on his injury that hasn't been very forthcoming, telling us about that one.
Obviously, that's unfortunate, but what is fortunate is since he's moved to the top line, Andrei Burakovsky is on a 4-game point streak, and not your normal 4-game point streak, a 4-game point streak in which he's had 2 points in every game, not just 1. What have you seen from Burakovsky to make you think that he can be not just a factor right now, but a factor over the course of the season? Is he turning the corner and maybe blossoming into a more significant player than just a second-line, third-line type guy?
I think so. I think he did turn a little bit of the corner on this trip. I think he gained a lot of confidence in himself, proving that he can come in here and put up points with good players. Did a great job on this trip, obviously, with 8 points here, right, in the last 4 games. 2 more tonight, 2 assists. Kind of a secondary, not a brilliant play or anything on his 1 point tonight, one of them, but Cale McCartan did the rest. He, at the end of the day, 2 points. He was active with the puck. He's got such big size, and he's got that good lefty wrister that can really sling that puck at the net. So he had a great trip. I think he did turn a corner, and bodes well for the future. I think he's cemented at least a second line job from here on out, I would say, based on what he did. I mean, I think he proved to a lot of people that even if Brandon and Landeskog come back, all right, so maybe he's not on the first line, but he's probably going to be penciled in for good on that second line.
If you look at the top 8 seeds in the Western Conference, the Avs are tied for third. However, out of those top 8, they have a game in hand, and they lead the entire Western Conference in goal differential at plus 14. Given the injuries, is it fair to say that maybe they've overachieved given those injuries, or do you think this is about where they should be?
I don't think we can say they've overachieved so much with the injuries, because don't forget they did have that 4 to 5 game lull
right
before this trip. It was pretty disappointing, and they did not play well, and there was a lot of hand-wringing over that. That was after those injuries. They win 3 of 5 on the road trip, so that's nice, and they won the game before that, taking off from the trip, right? But, I don't think we can say overachieved. They got off such a great start, 7-0-1 with the healthy lineup. That's really what has, given them that cushion for when some bad times happened. Can't say they've necessarily overachieved to a stupendous level, but they didn't fall apart. They come home from this trip with, I don't think anybody would have bet they'd have a winning record when they started out with 2 goalies hurt, but they did it. And I think it's a positive. It would have been nice to get that one tonight, though, against a Wild team. It's really not very good. So a little bit of a downer. It's sort of the same feeling you had after that road trip where they won all the games, and then they lost to St. Louis to end this trip, But hey, it's the NHL. can't win them all for sure. It's a tough league. Overall, I think things are still looking up, and they are going to get some guys back, hopefully soon.
He is Adrian Dater. Follow him at adater on Twitter. Colorado Hockey Now, our Avalanche insider. And I guess as well, AD, as we bid you adieu, we'll run into the spot where maybe we need a sash fit for Cale Makar when that second goal looked like he was ready to be named the mayor of Dangalopolis out there.
That was a hell of a goal. I was even, I don't jump up and down in the press box. Of course, no cheering in the press box, but I can tell you when he did that, I definitely gave a one of those, whoa kind of reactions, and a lot of people did in the box. So
yeah.
He's a special kid, that's for sure. 25 points now. Way ahead of Bobby Orr's pace. Not too bad.
Bobby Orr's pace. Unbelievable. It's not cheering in the press box. It's excitement over watching something extraordinary. It's a measure of respect.
Of course.
That's what it is.
Yeah, you don't want to be a fossil up there either. It's okay to react, right?
Yeah, when you see something impressive, it's impressive. Thanks, AD. We'll catch you next week. Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you, Sean.
All right, take care. Coach Vic Fangio of the Denver Broncos says it's not vitally important if Drew Lock plays at all this season. Brandon Allen will, of course, start this Sunday in Buffalo. And after that, we'll see. Yesterday, we had James Marilat from 104.3 The Fan on, and he actually posited something that I thought was an interesting idea. You're at least looking for theories that fit the facts, because the Broncos have given us nothing about their rationale behind Drew Lock. No crumbs, no anything. So you're just speculating based on the tiny bits of evidence you can find. James Marilat made the argument that perhaps their plan is to start Lock against the Chargers a week from Sunday. But the Broncos just don't feel like answering those questions yet, because if they said that now, all the questions this week would be about the Chargers game, not the Bills game. And he's right. That is the way it would go. But Fangio seemed rather definitive in his explanation out of Dove Valley yesterday. That was Coach Vic Fangio, and a little bit of taking that apart, playing a little bit of Sherlock Holmes on the internet, discovered that was John Forcade, the player he's talking about in the strike season of 1987, former Denver Dynamite Arena Football League player and champion. The Dynamite won the first Arena Bowl, if you remember back that far. And in the replacement player games in 87, he threw for 597 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, going 2-1. So when Fangio says he played pretty good, I guess that's obviously subjective. Look, he was there. He remembers it. He's talking about it. That's fine. But threw for roughly 300 yards a game, a touchdown, and on average, an interception against replacement players. So, not unbelievable. I guess I would look at that and say, looking back at John Forcade's stats in 87, I wouldn't go, oh, wow, yeah, this guy's definitely the answer. Now, Fangio was off a bit. I don't blame him for not remembering exactly how it went back in 1988. But Bobby Hebert played all 16 games in 88. In 1989, Forcade went 3-0 as a relief quarterback there. And then in 1990, he played 5 games with the Saints, subbing in for then starter Steve Walsh, and went 2-3. But the idea that because Forcade looked halfway decent against replacement players and turned out not to be a superstar, means that maybe they shouldn't play Drew Lock is completely baffling to me. Why would you want no data instead of some data? I understand his point. You can have a false positive. Isaac Yiadom has had a good game, for example. And at times, the Broncos thought, well, perhaps he can be the starter. Last week, as the Broncos defense was getting carved up by Kirk Cousins, they pulled Devontae Harris out, put Isaac Yiadom back in. Suffice it to say, things did not get better. And Fangio, in the same press conference of which you just heard that clip, said that they'll go back to Devontae Harris this week. So the argument that they got a false positive, yeah, of course that's the thing. A guy, when you make the NFL, is probably good enough to at least have his moments, for the most part. Even Paxton Lynch had moments. Even Garrett Bowles has moments. So I get that you can see a guy and think, okay, not too bad. Maybe we got our answer. For example, Brandon Allen had one of those moments against Cleveland 2 games ago. Then the next game against Minnesota, he couldn't complete 50% of his passes. So what Fangio is saying to a certain extent makes sense, in so much that it can be true that you can see limited duty from a player and then be fooled into thinking that you have the answer. But for the Broncos, in this case, you're 3-7. In that 87 season, Forcade was helping them finish off a 12-win season in New Orleans. With replacement players, obviously, strike season. But that was a season in which the team was performing well and you needed a guy to play well. The Broncos aren't in that spot. As I mentioned, open the show. They lose this game, they're 3-8. They're not making the playoffs. They win this game, they're 4-7, and still not making the playoffs. To get the idea, the Broncos right now are 13th in the AFC in the standings. 13th. There is one team in the AFC that is exactly 4-7. That is the LA Chargers. Ahead of the Broncos. They're 12th. The Chargers are still miles away from making the postseason. The Broncos, they have a free window here. They have a free opportunity to try out their young quarterback. False positive, false negative, whatever. They can get information. They can find out if the guy can play. Vic Fangio called Brandon Allen a gamer, right? Which generally means maybe not that good in practice, but when the game goes, lights turn on, the guy's for real, right? What Allen Iverson famously ranted about. It's not a game. Not a game. It's practice. Drew Lock's barely gotten that. He's got not a game, but a video game. A VR device called Striver. And to hear some of the official or affiliated outlets with the Broncos, he hasn't been very good at that video game. I don't know. I haven't been there. I haven't seen it. No one's seen it. But how's Brandon Allen been at the video game? Good? Has he even done it? Do we know? They haven't talked about it. Maybe Drew Lock's a gamer. Maybe he's not great in practice, or maybe great in VR. There's only one way to find out, though. You have to play him. Maybe James Marilat is right. Maybe the Broncos, this is a smokescreen. They plan to play him on December 1st against the Chargers. They just don't want to answer questions about it. That is another theory that fits the facts. Maybe so. But for the Broncos, if there is a plan, why are they hiding it? They're making things harder on themselves and harder on their fan base. It's not necessarily going to be popular, but there's a better way that the Broncos could handle this. And it's easy. I'll tell you what it is next. The Denver Broncos have a messaging problem. I think that's fair to say. If there is a plan when it comes to Drew Lock, the Broncos simply have not been able to find a way to elucidate, to make it clear, and for people to understand what it is. And maybe that's because the Broncos don't have a plan. As the season spirals out of control, and as people start to wonder more and more as to why this is happening, why people don't have any idea what the Broncos plan, you'll hear affiliated outlets, official word from the Broncos, starting to increase that, well, the Broncos never intended to play Drew Lock. This was going to be a redshirt year. Okay. I'm not sure if I buy that because the plan was never Brandon Allen because Brandon Allen wasn't on the roster until Drew Lock got hurt. There's no way they would have been predicting that. There's no way they were watching the waiver wire going, I think Brandon Allen's going to get released by the Rams. We'll definitely have to pick him up if that happens, regardless of how Joe Flacco and Drew Lock are playing. But let's say that was their intent. Let's say the intent was for Joe Flacco to make it through the year, not look washed up, and never play Drew Lock. It's a possibility. I don't think it's what the plan was, but it's a possibility. So if that was the case, and you're the Denver Broncos, why wouldn't you just say so? You didn't expect for Flacco to get hurt. You didn't expect Flacco to have to be put on the IR and have his season end. I understand that. But once he did, obviously things were going to be looking towards the backup quarterbacks and not the journeyman guy you picked up because your rookie was injured, but the rookie that you drafted in the second round, that you traded up to get. That was going to be the person that everyone was going to ask about. Not surprisingly, that's what's happening. So if the Broncos truly felt as if this was going to be a quote-unquote red shirt year for Drew Lock, why not just say it? Why not kill off all the speculation? Why not just say, hey, you know what? It's too bad Joe Flacco got hurt, but our plan this year was never to play Drew Lock. We wanted to give him a year in our system. We wanted to work on his footwork. We wanted to catch up on some of the NFL things as opposed to the way he's run his offenses in college. Broncos fans might not like that. I wouldn't have liked it. But it would have been an answer. And then instead of going, do the Broncos have a clue what they're doing? What are they doing? Which is what we're asking every day. What are they doing? It doesn't make sense. Do they even know what they're doing? Is there a plan? That's worse than just saying we have a plan and it's a bad plan. At least it's a plan. At least fans can look at it and go, okay, well, I wouldn't have done it that way, but okay, John Elway knows more about football than me, so I'll just trust him. Because Elway gets the benefit of the doubt there anyway. Believe me, over on the RamosLaw.com text line, 303-713-1043. I see it every night. 3 hours straight. I just watch that text line percolate. Full of people telling me that John Elway knows what he's doing. It went from Drew Lock's going to be great to Drew Lock isn't really going to be great to they never intended to play Drew Lock to they never even really intended to draft Drew Lock to they're going to trade Drew Lock. People want to believe that there's a plan. The common denominator of all those things that I hear on the station, whether it's a phone call or whether it's a text from fans, is they believe that there is a plan. Whether they agree with it or don't agree with it is secondary. They believe in their heart of hearts there's a plan for Drew Lock. So if the Broncos were to basically say, yeah, here's our plan, even if people didn't like it, it's very obvious the Broncos country is more than happy to accept just the word that there is a plan. as opposed to shrugging your shoulders or saying things like John Forcade looked okay in the strike season, but then he wasn't a great quarterback, so now I can't play Drew Lock. Or Drew Lock hasn't practiced enough, so we can't play him. Why isn't he practiced? Well, we won't let him practice. Those make the Broncos look silly. I don't know if there is a plan. The longer this goes on, the more I think there's not, because I don't think Elway and company are stupid. But I do think they got caught flat-footed. And I don't think they really spent a lot of time thinking about what will happen if Flacco gets hurt for the season. And we haven't focused getting on Drew Lock ready because we really thought in our heart of hearts that we'd be good under Joe Flacco and we'd worry about activating Theo Riddick rather than Lock because we think we'd be chasing a playoff spot. Even if the Broncos came out and admitted that, that wouldn't be bad. That would go over well. You'd at least know there is a plan. As it stands right now, nobody seems to have an answer. And everything the Broncos try to do to explain it makes it worse. Because none of the arguments they are making even hold up at face value, even under the most simple observation. It's clear that the arguments they're making don't make sense. They don't hold water. There's no part of them, not one thing that's come out of Dove Valley as to why, at this point, with a lost season, and it is a lost season, that they're not even entertaining playing Drew Lock. Give Broncos country a little credit. They want to believe you. To everyone at Dove Valley, your fans want to believe you. They want to believe in you. They want to believe there's a plan. So if there is one, just share it. Save this. But when the Broncos end up looking inept, like they do look right now. I'm not saying they are inept. I'm saying they look inept. They have a bad record. They keep seeming to think that they've cracked the code and they're going to make the playoffs, and they're bad year in and year out over the last 3 years. Not close. Not 8-8. They're bad. 5 wins, then 6 wins. They're on pace to win 5 again. They might not even do that. The Broncos haven't even been just spinning their wheels. They've been losing traction. Their fans want to believe that the people in charge can fix it, but they need to know what the plan is. But you wonder if it's there at all. Because the longer this goes on, the more you think they're just kind of making it up as they go, hoping they can just stall with sillier and sillier stories that are more and more transparent, and hope that eventually they can kick the can down the road till the end of the season, and then it's an off-season discussion. Maybe they'll be lucky enough to do it. And maybe that's not what they're trying to do, but that's what it looks like. So my free advice to the Broncos is, you're making yourselves look bad. You don't have to. Even if the plan isn't a good plan, even if fans don't even like the plan, the fact that there's a plan at all, that's an upgrade. Any plan. Just say it. Teams don't like it when their ownership or their brass end up saying that we're having a rebuilding year. We're just not where we want to be. We're going to need to have a rebuilding year. They don't like it, but they understand it. They respect it. That's what the Broncos are failing to do here. Are they failing to do it because they're being coy? Are they failing to do it because they don't have a plan? The problem is, we don't know. We don't know. like I said, the affiliated outlets kind of have messaging that's pretty straightforward. One of those talked about what position they think the Broncos think is the most important going forward when they do reach that offseason. I'll tell you what that is next. Obviously, this time of the evening, you don't end up talking about it very much, but a weird weather day today, and we've had warm weather. It's cold. It's very icy. About an hour ago, you had a crash at 6th Avenue and I-25 involving over 50 cars. Fortunately, according to the Denver police, no life-threatening injuries, but both directions at 6th remain closed, all the way to Calumet. So be careful out there. Eastbound 6th Avenue closed at Federal. Westbound 6th closed at Calumet. More than 50 cars stacked up on I-25. So, look, if you're out driving, listening to the program, we care about you. Be careful, okay? Go slow. Take it easy. Doesn't look that bad. It just looks a little wet, but it's slick. Don't want you wrapped up in one of those accidents either. So be careful. Over at 9news.com, they'll remind you, the official station of the Denver Broncos. As an affiliated outlet, oftentimes you find yourself privy to maybe angles on something that are unique. Read between the lines there if you'd like. But Mike Kliss today wrote about the Broncos' priorities going into 2020, understanding that Chris Harris Jr. is likely to leave this team. And when I say likely, I mean 95% likely. So if you're asking me, I don't think there's a chance Chris Harris comes back next year. So Kliss argues that the Broncos are already taking a peek at cornerbacks, figuring that that is their most likely target in the offseason, whether it's in draft or free agency. Isaac Yiadom's failure to be able to basically even stay on the field makes it very tricky. Harris will move on. You don't know what you've got in Callahan, who, by the way, Callahan was signed to this team and basically getting a promotion from being just a slot cover guy to a starting corner. And quite frankly, at this point, I wouldn't suspect you'll see him play in a Broncos uniform all year. I don't know what it'll be next year. Okay, he's done. Callahan is finito. So after that foot surgery, we'll see where he's at. But they were already asking him to make a leap. And with Chris Harris gone, you're talking about Callahan after missing an entire year. And Devontae Harris? Duke Dawson? So cornerback may be where the Broncos go. And that does make some sense. Some pretty good corners in the draft. Jeff Okudah of Ohio State is generally the consensus best guy. Christian Fulton from LSU. Virginia's Bryce Hall, of Alabama's Trayvon Diggs, cornerbacks that might all be first-round candidates. There are also some guys in free agency that might end up working too. Marcus Peters is available. Don't know if the Broncos are going to go that route. Byron Jones of the Cowboys, Kendall Fuller of the Chiefs, all expected to be available for free agency. So the Broncos potentially going cornerback makes a lot of sense. I get it. This is a passing league. And I would make the argument you don't need 2 starting cornerbacks to be successful in defense nowadays. You need 3. You don't just line up in the standard base package all the time. A lot of the teams, their base package is essentially nickel. If you look at the amount of times they play in it. You need 3. You need 3 top-quality corners if you're going to be a top-tier defense in this league and sustain it. The Broncos, after this year, might not have any. They may have an oft-injured guy who just missed an entire season and a couple of guys who are just trying to gain a foothold into the league in Devontae Harris and Duke Dawson Jr. As Vic Fangio pointed out after the game, Dawson has had 5 straight games in which he's had a penalty. Now, that doesn't seem to stop Garrett Bowles from playing every week, so I take that what you will. But obviously, Dawson has to be better. The Broncos are a way off, and they'll be a ways off when you talk about losing someone like Chris Harris. And that's the concern when you look at this Broncos defense. It's coming around. Like I said, we looked at it earlier. 4th in total yards allowed, 7th in scoring, 11th against the run, 5th in passing yards, 7th in third down, 2nd in red zone percentage. All top 10. Yeah, they're lacking in sacks. They're definitely lacking in turnovers. They're the very worst teams in the league in the latter. But there's a core here. There's a kernel here of something that's very real and very lasting. Or could be. The problem is the free agency situation. Chris Harris, Derek Wolfe, Justin Simmons, who I think everyone's just assumed will be back with the Broncos. Don't assume that. Don't make that mistake. Simmons' backup, Will Parks, and Shelby Harris. He had 3 sacks last week. They're all unrestricted free agents. All of them. Unrestricted. There are a couple restricted free agents. Devontae Bosby, who was hurt, but looked like maybe he could play. Mike Purcell, who's been terrific. Restricted free agents. They'll probably be back. Von Miller and Todd Davis have team options for 2020. Sure, Miller will be back. Quite frankly, I think Davis will too. But you're talking about 4 starters. Chris Harris, Derek Wolfe, Justin Simmons, and Shelby Harris. They could all go somewhere else. I think 3 of them are going somewhere else. I'm confident Chris Harris and Derek Wolfe will. I have a feeling Shelby Harris will, although the Broncos could find a way to give him a substantial raise. That's a possibility. Justin Simmons, probably the most significant free agent the Broncos have left. The more the Broncos lose, the less likely they are to retain Justin Simmons. Remember, you think of the Broncos as this grand crown jewel of the NFL, which it is, and which it has been. Simmons looks at it as a team that he's been on that's more than a dozen games below 500 in his career. Those glory days that you're thinking of, by and large, with the exception of Super Bowl 50, not part of what Justin Simmons grew up with. He doesn't think about it that way. The Broncos need to prove that they're going to get better and get better quickly. He's in his prime. He's on the rise. Looking to go somewhere and win. Cecil Lammy and I talked about it earlier this week when we do our handoff in between shows on Tuesday. There's a team out there somewhere that looks at Justin Simmons and thinks this is the final piece to our Super Bowl puzzle. The Broncos are going to have to make an argument that they're the better choice for him to be there than that. That's just going to come with a dollar sign. The Broncos are going to have to overpay to retain Justin Simmons. And they're not exactly in the best salary cap situation yet. So it's great to see the defense start playing the way it has. But when you hear that the Broncos may be pursuing cornerbacks, that's good. That might have to be just the start for the Broncos to become and stay a defense first team while they continue to try to do something, anything that works for their offense. Our stat of the night. It's a good one. I was impressed. Kevin Kistner found it. I'll read it to you next. Our stat of the night comes to you from Milwaukee, where the Bucks knocked off the Trailblazers 137-129. And Giannis Antetokounmpo, there are triple doubles, and then there are triple doubles. This is the latter variety. Giannis goes 24 points, 19 boards, and 15 assists in tonight's game. Whoa. That's something. Off to that kind of start, the Bucks led at halftime 72-58. Unless you think that's unusual. Kevin Kistner over in the booth looked it up. How many times is that this season that the Bucks have had 70 in the first half?
7 games this year. They've scored 70 points.
70.
I'm going through the Nuggets right now. I've only seen one so far.
70 in the first half. 7 times. They've played 15 games. What do you do if you're a road team? You come into Milwaukee, they put 70 on you at halftime. I mean, you're already thinking of just going home, aren't you? Wow. Moreover, again, 15th game of the season. We'll get this. Minus that bonkers triple-double. Giannis has had a double-double in all 15 games of the season. You might not think that's all that long, but it is. That ties Kevin Love, who did this in 2011-2012. That 15-game streak to start the season with double-doubles, that's the longest in 30 years. What Giannis is doing is amazing. If that wasn't enough, remember, 19 rebounds and 15 assists, making him the first NBA forward to have a 15-point, 15-rebound, 15-assist game. He had 19 boards, 24 points, 15, 15, 15. The last guy to do that, Larry Legend. Larry Bird in 1987. It's the last time a forward's done that. Unbelievable. The talent of this guy is just amazing. There are more than a few players, right, that are worth the price of admission in the NBA and really in every league. Someone like Mike Trout in baseball, Patrick Mahomes in football. But Giannis is right there with all those very, very, very best. I mean, it's impressive stuff. 24, 19, and 15. As they go off to a 12-3 start to the season. The Milwaukee Bucks are, with that win, take the lead in the Eastern Conference, leapfrog the Celtics. Second best record in the entire NBA behind only the Lakers. And they're averaging a league-high 120.8 per game. 6-game winning streak, win 9 of their last 10, and they've scored 70 points in the first half of 7 of their first 15. If those aren't stat of the night numbers, I don't know what is. Those are amazing. Sticking with the NBA for a little bit, of course, the Denver Nuggets tomorrow night will host the 11-3 Boston Celtics, the team that Milwaukee just leapfrogged. Nuggets, of course, with an enormous statement win over the Rockets. But this game against Boston, another benchmark game. Exactly what you want, by the way, if you're a Nuggets fan. You want them to play these games. You want them to play these teams. And you want to have them play them on back-to-back games, if not back-to-back nights. This is the test. Are you for real? If you're not for real, what do you need to do to be for real? So the Nuggets will get another big-time matchup tomorrow. Be fun to watch how that shakes out. The Denver Broncos now, as they go into this game against Buffalo. And I want to open this up to everyone on the RamosLaw.com text line. That's 303-713-1043. What do you think? How do you feel? I kind of want to put my finger on the pulse of Broncos country here. Do you still believe the Broncos have a chance to make the playoffs? If so, please explain it to me. But the next question would be, now that they almost certainly will not, do you care how many games the Broncos lose the rest of the way? I'm not suggesting the Broncos tank. I think you understand that tanking isn't what you want to do. Look, if you want to keep a Justin Simmons like I talked about earlier, you can't tank. You're going to need to do your best to try to win games. I get it. But if the Broncos lose out of their final 6, if they lose 4, 5, 6, where's your breaking point? Where does your frustration boil over? And does it change if the quarterback is Brandon Allen or Drew Lock? If they do decide to play Drew Lock and Lock gets his feet wet and takes his lumps and the Broncos lose games, are you more forgiving of it than if it's Brandon Allen? I admit that I would be. I'd like to know what you think. 303-713-1043. Are the Broncos making things harder on themselves when they actually could have, instead of telling bizarre stories that don't really have any bearing on why Drew Lock isn't playing? Are they making it harder on themselves? Because the truth is, if Drew Lock played and the Broncos lost, maybe Broncos country is okay with that. Maybe they're okay with losses in 2019 with Drew Lock that might not be losses in 2020. That's the way I look at it. If there's one upside to this disastrously disappointing season, it's that you get a free crack at looking at your rookie quarterback. You get a free shot. Whether he's good or bad, you at least get an idea of what he needs to work on in the offseason, and you can give him the whole offseason to do it now with a better idea of what he needs to do. So, when is the right time to make this happen? For me, that time already passed. I wanted him to start against Minnesota, and that's before Joe Flacco got hurt. That's after the Broncos started 0-4 and kissed their playoff chances goodbye. That didn't happen. It's not going to happen this week in Buffalo. The Broncos haven't even decided if they'll activate him, let alone make him the backup, let alone start him. So when would you start Drew Lock? Adam Schefter, this morning, with Mike Evans and Mark Schlereth, Adam Schefter thinks he has an idea of when Drew Lock will play. And he does think Drew Lock will play this year. But when you look at the games that he thinks Lock will play, will it be enough? We'll hear from Schefter next. Earlier today, Adam Schefter was on with Mike Evans and Mark Schlereth. Usually is. And as usual, every week, a terrific source of inside information and knowledge about the NFL and the Broncos in particular. Of course, if you've been in the town for a while, you remember Schefter when he was working the beats here in Denver, and of course, keeps a lot of those connections going. And he came on the program and had an idea when he thought that Drew Lock would make his debut for the Denver Broncos. Here's what he said. There you have it. The last two games of the season would be Detroit and Oakland. This has been something that's been bandied about before. The idea that he'd just play in the last two games. What I don't understand, and I don't doubt Schefter a bit, but what I don't understand is the idea that Drew Lock has to be in the absolute right spot. What's the right spot? What does that mean? Does that mean facing against a Detroit Lions team that might be playing out the string like the Broncos? Is that what they're talking about? What is the right spot? The idea that we have to have this Goldilocks situation, pun not intended with the Drew Lock thing, doesn't make any sense to me. And it doesn't make any sense to me for multiple reasons. I'd like to know what you think. The RamosLaw.com text line is 303-713-1043. There are a bunch of reasons that this doesn't make sense. One of them is the fact that if you just want him, he's not playing in games that matter, then how do you're talking about the false positives that Vic Fangio mentioned? Well, that's a false positive, right? If you go and play two teams that aren't playing for anything, now Oakland may very well be. Well, let's say they're not. You go play a couple teams that aren't playing for anything, that are playing out the string, and Drew Lock looks amazing. Isn't that exactly what Vic Fangio's worried about as a false positive? To avoid that, you have to play him in games against teams that are playing for something. And the Chargers game might not even be that. But Houston will be. Kansas City will be. Get him in for those games. See what he can do against opponents that want to win, that it matters if they win, that have something at stake. I don't understand what the idea is. You have to get him in the perfect spot. This porridge is too hot. This porridge is too cold. Doesn't make any sense. On top of that, let's think about this. You can't plan for that in the NFL, and here's why. Earlier this week, left guard Dalton Risner, center Connor McGovern, and right guard Ron Leary all missed practice because they were hurt. Now, all three of them are expected to play this week. But as the season goes along and the Broncos sink further and further to the bottom of the AFC Ocean, the team is going to be less inclined to play guys that are hurt that matter. If Dalton Risner has a nagging injury, and it's week 16 with Detroit coming to town and the Broncos and the Lions playing for nothing. If I'm the Broncos, I don't even consider. If Dalton Reisner has a stomach ache by then, I'm not playing him. Why would you risk him? He's already your best offensive lineman as a rookie. So in a totally lost season, in a meaningless game, why would you risk him? Now, all of a sudden, does that mean that it's no longer the perfect spot because the offensive line is compromised? You cannot plan for what the Broncos are trying to do. If they're really trying to put him in the last 2 weeks because they think that's the perfect fit, the perfect time, well, they don't know it'll be the perfect time. How do you know who will be hurt? How do you know who will be available? Will Jawan James be playing? Who knows? Will McGovern or Leary be playing? Who knows? Will Reisner be playing? Who knows? If any one of those guys are gone, does that mean it's no longer the perfect spot to try out Drew Lock? You don't go to war with the soldiers you wish you had. You go to war with the soldiers you have. If this is what the Broncos are trying to plan, as Adam Schefter suggests, then they are making the same kind of mistake they've made over the last couple of years by fooling themselves into believing they have control over the uncontrollable. Part of the wisdom of life is understanding there's a million things in the world you can control and there's a million things in the world you can't. Identifying which is which matters a lot because the ones that you can control, you should work your tail off to get them the way you want them. The ones you can't, you got to let it go, and you have to accept you don't have control over those situations. But if the Broncos are assuming that potentially 2 meaningless games at the end of the season are the perfect time to try Drew Lock, what if they have injuries on the offensive line to keep those guys out? They have injuries on the offensive line right now. Everybody on this offensive line has suffered injuries that have made them miss at least practices, except Garrett Bowles. Every single one of their starters, except Garrett Bowles, who already, by the way, keeps it from being the perfect spot to put Drew Lock. Any injuries there, now what? Philip Lindsay missed the end of the year with an injury last year. What if he does again? Is it no longer the perfect spot to try Drew Lock? What if Noah Fant is hurt? You can't control these things. The Broncos are trying to make a prediction on the perfect time based on things they cannot control. And the further out you project, the less accurate you're going to be. That's not just sports. That's everything. That's life. The further out you project something, the less likely you are to be right. The Broncos should be thinking near term. They always joke, right? The old macho joke. This is the NFL, not for long. Don't plan for long. This season is done. If you're looking for the perfect time to play Drew Lock, it's when he's ready to play. When he's healthy, when he knows the playbook, go. When he knows enough to be functional, go. The idea that you have to have a whole offseason and training camp. Well, Drew Lock actually got that. Brandon Allen didn't. He wasn't on the team. Hasn't stopped the Broncos from playing him. The idea that you'd wait till the last 2 weeks because it would be the perfect time, you have no idea what that will look like. And if you're worried about a false positive, that's when you'd get it. Everything the Broncos say they want to avoid, they seem to be intentionally working their way towards. Do they simply not understand it? Or are they selling this badly? I don't know. I just know it doesn't make sense. And in a team that's going to its 3rd straight losing season, being incomprehensible is maybe the worst thing you could be. And that's where the Broncos are. They are opaque. and they are confusing. And their explanations don't make sense. They prevaricate, they talk in circles. And now if the idea is really that they hope that in a month it'll be the perfect time to play Drew Lock, you have no idea what that looks like when we come back. And when you get there, you don't know. One of the things that they couldn't predict and still can't predict is the wide receiver position. Our own Kevin Kistner wrote a story about that. Have they found their number 2 guy? We'll talk about that next. talking about the Denver Broncos Goldilocks situation. That time I meant the pun, actually. I meant it that time. I was after it. The Broncos keep looking for the perfect spot for him, like the Three Bears story. And it's gotten that silly. Is there a perfect spot to start Drew Lock? Can you even control such a thing in the NFL? Let's go to the RamosLaw.com text line 303-713-1043 and talk to Mitchell. Mitchell, how are you? Mitchell,
Hey, Sean.
Hey, how are you?
Doing great. Longtime fan of yours. Been listening on the radio ever since you took over the Nights out from Sandy. So I appreciate everything and all the info you put out there.
Oh, thank you.
My big thing is when they let Matt Paradis go, I feel that they would have kept him at center instead of signing Juwan James. I know there was that uncertainty with his fractured fibula, but if you've looked what he's done with Carolina and transforming that O-line for Christian McCaffrey and giving Kyle Allen a decent start being the quarterback of that O-line, being the head guy there, you know, if we had him, Connor McGovern, and Garrett Bowles, and our other guard, whose name I'm forgetting right now, I apologize. Dalton Reisner. I don't know why I forgot his name.
Yeah, he's the best one.
You know, we'd be in a lot better spot. I mean, you'd have a guy who'd be able to pick up these blitz coverages that were basically destroying Flacco instead of having a guy who's first time playing center, McGovern, and you would have had another guy you could have gone in free agents for a lot cheaper to get a tackle to back up Elijah Wilkinson, even though we didn't really know what he was at the time. I think if we had Paradis, we wouldn't be looking at our sieve of an offensive line that's like, okay, who's going to give up the sack this time?
Mitchell, I think that's fair. I do. And I will say this. I didn't have a problem. It hurt a little bit, but I didn't have a problem letting go of Paradis because of the injury history and the age. Now, the problem is then the Broncos immediately spent all that money plus more on another guy with an injury history. So that made the decision a bad one. The Broncos have a nasty habit, you might have noticed, of late. Juwan James, Bryce Callahan. Could go back and forth over the last couple of years and see more and more guys of signing injured players and then acting surprised when they, get injured. But it's a good point. If you were going to go gamble on that, I mean, this is where you get stuck. Sometimes it's better the devil you know, right? And I think that's what Mitchell's making the argument. At least you knew what you got out of Matt Paradis, injury risk or not. Now you went and got a right tackle with an injury history off a bad team, and he ends up acting like it. Well, that's where the Broncos are now. The idea that it's a perfect situation got quite a bit of reaction on the RamosLaw.com text line, which Mitchell just called in there as well. More than a few assertions that the Broncos don't really have a plan. And that could be the case. This is the problem with being so opaque. Speaking, a text that came in actually just a couple minutes before Mitchell went on said, "You're describing the Broncos perfectly. They have a knack for throwing money at other teams' guys while watching their own walk away." It's exactly what Mitchell was referring to. From the 303-667, just because they're not playing lock, the Broncos are confusing. I don't think so, though. I'm still going with Brandon. Okay. Well, the Broncos are doing that. The requisite, we always get one of these a night. Don't forget, Patrick Mahomes didn't play the last game of his first year. How did that turn out? Well, torched the Broncos. Roasted a real bad Broncos team. I remember that. But again, I feel like I'm going to say this every night. Causality is not commonality. So just because Patrick Mahomes played in Week 17 and is a good quarterback does not mean that Patrick Mahomes became a good quarterback because he made his debut in Week 17. There is no causal relation to that. So if Drew Lock is a good quarterback, whether he starts against the Chargers or Week 16 or Week 17 or anything in between, he will still be a good quarterback. The week in which he debuts has nothing to do about whether he will be a good quarterback or not. And we get these confused, and I get it, because what Broncos fans are trying to do, I'm not offended, I'm not bothered. What Bronco fans are trying to do is I can feel it. I can feel it through the text line here. I really can. You're looking for competent quarterback play, and you're grasping at straws to find some. So if Aaron Rodgers sat behind Brett Favre, you can think, well, other guys sat behind other quarterbacks, and they turned out to be really good. Well, maybe that's what'll happen for the Broncos. Well, Patrick Mahomes didn't start till the Week 17 game, and then he turned out to be a great quarterback. Maybe that'll happen for the Denver Broncos, and maybe it will. But what you're projecting is simply hope, not evidence, not anything factual. It's hope. And I get that. I share that with you. But my job here isn't to cheerlead and just say, oh, guess what? Patrick Mahomes started in Week 17, so guess what? If Drew Lock starts in Week 17, you never know. I can't do that. That's not my job. I need to explain how things really work. And when Patrick Mahomes started, didn't have to do anything to do with the reason he became a good quarterback or not. Many things had to do with that. First and foremost, Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. 2, he's with a great offensive coach in Andy Reid. 3, the Chiefs completely restructured their offense to build it around him once they realized Patrick Mahomes was Patrick Mahomes. And they went and got a bunch of rocket-propelled wide receivers to take advantage of the things he can do that's special. Oh, and they had another unicorn-type player in Travis Kelce. But when Mahomes debuted doesn't have anything to do with it. And I understand why people feel that way. And I understand the Aaron Rodgers, he turned out to be good because he sat for years. No, that's not why. From the 720, if you play him against teams that aren't playing for anything, it's basically starting him in a preseason game. And how much can you learn from that? Yes. Thank you. That was from Tom. Nailed it, Tom. From 605, you're right. The week that he debuts only has to do with how soon we can find out if he has it or not, and stop wasting precious time. From Ryan. Ryan, you're correct. That's the catch. What the Broncos are doing right now is basically saying no information is better than some information. And that's bonkers. I don't know what you do for a living, but I'm trying to think of anybody's job in any capacity, anywhere, or even if you don't have a job and you're just a parent, or you're just trying to do whatever you're doing, I'm trying to think of any situation in which no information is better than some information. I can't even envision one. It doesn't make sense. Not everyone agrees. From the 303-842, you realize this is Allen's 4th year in the league, and Locke has played 4 weeks on virtual reality, right? Well, yes, I do know about the virtual reality stuff. That's true. I get that. And I do know Brandon Allen's been in the league 4 years. Yeah. Although he didn't throw a pass in his career until November 3rd. I get that. But if there's a reason you're on at 11 p.m. in Denver, it's apparent after listening to you talk about the quarterback situation, you are an imbecile. Well, maybe. However, since I started in this town on air, my hometown, by the way, back in 2012, I'm not going to claim being right about Peyton Manning. That's not rocket science. But I was right about Brock Osweiler. I was right about Paxton Lynch. I was right about Trevor Siemian. I was right about Dak Prescott. I was right about Lamar Jackson. I was right about Brandon Allen. Right about Joe Flacco. Right about Case Keenum. And you spelled a parent wrong. Otherwise, I'm with you. We'll be back. Oh, let's do exactly that. We're going to go back to November 21st, 1966, 53 years ago, on the West Coast of West Covina, California. A man who played phenomenal college career. 2 different opportunities in schools there. Then became one of the NFL's all-time great, but in between that, won the 1983 Oklahoma High School State Championship in typing.
Whoa. Hold on. Typing?
Typing.
On the computer.
Well,
Or
probably a
typewriter.
typewriter. 1983 Oklahoma High School State Championship in typing. Want to guess who it is?
I have no idea.
Let's play it. It's Troy Aikman's birthday.
Ah, happy birthday.
He's 53 years old. 3-time Super Bowl champ, Super Bowl MVP, 6-time Pro Bowler, Walter Payton Man of the Year, consensus All-American, won the Davey O'Brien National Championship in 85, Heisman Trophy finalist. He's number 8, still retired at UCLA. One of the best athletes turned analysts that I think I've heard in football. And the 1983 Oklahoma State champion in typing, Troy Aikman.
And he kind of looks like Jay-Z.
I'd never thought about that. I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to look at that. I'm gonna find that out on Sunday.
You got to.
Is it once you can't? Is it one of those things once you see it, you can't unsee it?
Exactly. I'm surprised you haven't seen any of these memes.
Yeah, I haven't.
Ever.
I haven't. Well, I was too busy researching that he won the Oklahoma typing championship.
I mean, look up a picture of Jay-Z and then just put him back.
They
to
do
back.
have the same sort of sideways smile.
Yeah,
I can see that.
I was told back in college from a good buddy, Bill Rogan. Do you know Bill Rogan? Kind of covers DU a little bit.
Oh, okay.
He said I look like a 14-year-old version of Troy Aikman.
Actually, you sort of do.
I was like, I'll take 3 Super Bowl rings. Yeah. I'll take it.
You're about the same height. How tall are you?
6'4".
That's Aikman's 6'4".
Oh,
How's your arm? Not as good? I'm betting bet not as good.
probably.
Because you're on here with me.
Yeah. Well,
I'm gonna guess not as good.
I didn't try out for the football team, so we'll have to find out.
So you'll never know. How's your typing?
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
It's above average.
That's true. I mean, you're on that computer the whole time, so I don't doubt it. Do you think typing would help you with football? I can imagine it would help you if you were maybe a pitcher in baseball, because all the weird grips with your fingers. Maybe that would help.
Maybe memorizing where letters are on the keyboard.
Yeah, maybe patterns.
Oh, is Troy Aikman my dad?
He's got the nimble fingers. Maybe that helped. If I ever run into him, I'm going to ask him. I'm going to ask him if typing benefited his playing career somehow.
It's probably like a horrible typer now.
It's probably super handy for him now, actually. Sitting in the booth, you got to look stuff up. You got to do everything. I mean, I guess you can trace with your finger on the iPad and trace all the plays. But, it's funny. Growing up here in Colorado, and my earliest sports memory, and I'll date myself a little bit, but my earliest sports memory, and it's very, very, very vague, is the Broncos losing their first Super Bowl appearance to the Cowboys back in the fall of the 77 season. And ever since then, I'm not going to lie, I've hated the Dallas Cowboys. Now, it doesn't help that they also, like a Jerry Jones, and they've had Barry Switzer, and all those folks that kind of rub people the wrong way. But I never disliked Aikman. Never did.
I mean, what could you hate him on though? That's the thing.
Yeah.
I understand how people hate Tom Brady because there's a lot of baggage that comes with it.
Right. Yeah. Where was Aikman's baggage?
Yeah. Other than he had a great receiver and a great running back and a great offensive line.
Yeah, no beef. Great, phenomenal player, pro and college football Hall of Fame, and really, honestly, I mean, when I think of television analysts on the pro level, who were top tier players who have become absolutely fantastic in-game analysts, I think of two, and they're both quarterbacks. And they're both Hall of Famers. I think of Troy Aikman and I think of Dan Fouts.
Not Tony Romo?
Not yet. Too soon.
Okay.
Because I want to see what happens in a couple years when the whole Romo-Stradamus thing, see, he's still very close to the modern game.
Okay.
Game hasn't changed. I'm not knocking Romo. I enjoy listening to him. But the game hasn't changed all that much since when he retired, right?
Correct.
Let's see what happens when you're out of the league for a while. Remember, Aikman retired following the 2000 season. I mean, he's been out for almost 20 years. And this NFL barely resembles, in a lot of ways, the one that Aikman played in. And it really doesn't resemble one that Fouts did. And when I want to hear when Romo he doesn't have the ability to read things the way he did as a player because the game's changed a bit. I want to see how he breaks that down. Because right now, there's a little bit of a shtick that 2 seconds before the play, he's going to tell you what the play is going to be. And I'm not saying that Romo doesn't know a billion times more about football than me. He does. But I can do that on a fair share of NFL football players. I've seen enough football, and I know down and distance and the situation of the players to do that. So I want Romo to get away from that, which is a little bit shtick. I think he can do more, but I want to see him do it.
See, I love the predicting the plays. I think it's so funny. I really do. You
don't do it yourself?
I mean,
and have a pretty high rate of success?
I do, and then when the color commentator's wrong, I yell at the TV with, like, Dan Fouts.
Right.
I mean, that guy has no clue what's going on.
Oh, you're so wrong.
Dan Fouts?
Yeah, you're so wrong.
Oh.
So wrong.
Did you watch that Broncos game this year against them?
They can't all be winners.
It was bad.
I'm not going to sit here and say every single one of these shows we're going to be memorialized and people are going to listen to 40 years from now. I know that. They can't all be winners. Fouts is good. I would argue Fouts is a better college analyst than even is pro, though, for whatever reason. He's great on college broadcasts.
I don't think I've seen him on a college broadcast.
It's been a while, but he's really good.
Do you like Collinsworth? I love Collinsworth on Sunday night.
I do. I like him. I like him. It's better than most. It's better than most. I'm easy as being the non-athlete guy. I sort of look towards the others. So pretty much I look at to me it's easy. Like if I'm watching NFL football, I want Kevin Harlan to be on the call. That's all I care about.
Jim Nance.
Everything else. Hello, friends.
If he should do that during a Super Bowl.
He totally should. I would.
Hello, friends.
That's what he's known for.
We're live here
right?
at Levi Stadium, Super Bowl 50.
Really quiet with that little soft piano music in the background. That'll fire you up for a Super Bowl.
It's great. If that does, even when you're watching the Masters, and if that doesn't get you fired up, I don't know what does.
It's crazy because all he does is talk real quietly.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. My favorite is you watch a golf event now, or even football, and you'll see Jim Nance's wardrobe provided by Jim Nance because he has his own clothing line, and every time I see it, it just cracks me up. It's like Jim. Well, I'm like, well, duh. I mean, to put on his own clothes, it'd be like saying my wardrobe's provided by me. Well, yeah, I went to the mall. I don't have my own line, but I bought it, so it's mine, and I provided it.
We
don't put it on the credits.
Drotar's Designs.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, that would probably be like the spaghetti sauce that I spilled on it on the way in. That would be the designs. Aikman's 53. There's another birthday, but we just wanted to use that clip. And, we're talking football. And I didn't also want to get into it because it would make me feel old. It is Ken Griffey Jr.'s 50th birthday.
Wow. 50 already.
50.
Doesn't even look 50.
The kid Griffey. Ken Griffey Jr., 50 years old. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. I don't even want to think about that. The Avs finished their road trip. They finished it in slightly disappointing fashion, though it certainly had its moments. Cale Makar got it done. We'll break that down. We'll look towards the Nuggets and the Celtics tomorrow. And the border war, the battle for the bronze boot. That's coming tomorrow night, too. We'll take a peek at that as well. Next. Well, that sounds like a little appropriate tunes for the big college game tomorrow night. National television, Colorado State goes up to Laramie, take on the Wyoming Cowboys in this year's version of the Border War, battle for the Bronze Boot. Going to be a tough pull for the Rams. Wyoming's not having a knockout year. 6-4, 3-3 in conference. The Rams are also 3-3 in the Mountain West. 4-6 on the year. They put a lot of pressure on themselves by losing that game to Air Force. And understandable. Look, Air Force is having a great year. Air Force is 8-2. It's phenomenal. CSU has a chance to make a bowl. They can do it. They need to win this game tomorrow. That's doable. Not easy, but doable. Then the next one, number 20 ranked Boise State to finish the season. Rams at 4-6 need them both to make a bowl game. So an enormous game for them. Wyoming has won 7 of the last 10, including 3 in a row. But since this rivalry goes all the way back to 1899, CSU leads it on the whole 58-47 with 5 ties. And actually looking that up, really weird because between 1936 and 1940, those 5 games, they tied 3 times. The weirder part of those ties, they were all the same score. The weirder part of that is the score was 0-0. How's that for a history bit?
0-0.
In 1936, CSU, then Colorado A&M, tied 0-0. 1938, tied 0-0. 1940, tied 0-0. In between then, in that 5-year span, though, and even beyond that, the 1937 game, Wyoming won 7-0. In 1939, Colorado A&M won 22-0. In 1941, 27-0, Colorado A&M. They also won the next 2 years, 10-0, 7-0. That meant between 1936 and 1946, one of the teams was shut out in every game.
That's unheard of.
even in that time period. How weird is that?
That's got to be...
That's so weird.
That's got to be like a historic stat in just college football in general.
10 straight seasons, a team was shut out in every game, and 3 of them were 0-0 ties. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
That's got to be the only time 2 college teams have done something like that.
Nobody has been shut out in the series since 2010, though, when Wyoming spanked CSU 44-0. Hopefully that won't happen. Like to see a good game there. Like to see Colorado State take that game. Making that matchup with Boise State be for a bowl, that would be terrific. Touch on them a little bit. Tomorrow, Colorado, by the way, also has a opportunity to bowl if they win out. But if you thought that Colorado State's road was hard, try the Buffaloes. In other words, the Rams might happen. The Buffaloes are not going to happen. It disappoints me as, a Buffalo. But it ain't going to happen.
It's first-time head coach.
They are not going to number 7 Utah on the 30th and winning that game.
Hey, I'm going to be out there. I might stay for that game.
Might as well.
I'll if they upset them, I will run onto the field for us.
There you go.
I'll represent.
All right. You'll get arrested
Probably.
for us.
But I'm like, you can't arrest me. It's an upset. I'm running onto the field. Maybe there'll be like 5 extra students hanging around.
You'll just get a stern look of disapproval. That's all.
End up on the news.
It'll be fine. One maniac who was really into Colorado's 5-7 season.
Smallest crowd to run onto a field on an upset.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Remember, Utah is 7th in the college football playoff rankings right now. If you were to somehow win that, which, spoiler alert, they won't, that'd be all over the news. The Avs lose tonight to wrap up their road trip. They lose 3-2. They go down 2-0 early to Minnesota. Then Cale Makar, as I said before, mayor of Dangleopolis on his second goal. It was unbelievable. Makar scores 2 more goals. He is having a crazy Calder Trophy. Forget that. Makar for Norris.
See, here you go with those trophies again. The Calder Trophy. Which one is that?
Rookie of the year.
Rookie of the year. Okay.
Norris is defenseman of the year.
You got to write these down.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get it. We're gonna get you by the end of the year. We're gonna get that. You're gonna know all of them. You're gonna know the Masterson and the Lady Bing. You're gonna have them all.
Lady Bing, that's the
Oh, see, you're learning already.
That's the encouragement award.
Sportsmanship,
same thing.
Masterson's perseverance.
Okay.
They do award some strange things in hockey, but it's tradition. It's kind of cool. Avs will be back at it on Saturday against the Maple Leafs. Tomorrow, the Nuggets, hot off their win, their very impressive win over the Rockets, will take on the Boston Celtics. Nuggets at 10-3, Celtics at 11-3. That is going to be a big game as well. So, looking forward to a lot of this. It's going to be a good weekend. There's going to be some good games. You have the Broncos and the Bills, of course. Going to have good Avs matchup, good Nuggets matchup, some important college games locally. Going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. Tomorrow, speaking of college games, if I'm not mistaken, we have DU hockey tomorrow, right?
We got DU right here on the fan.
We got DU right here. Got them tomorrow against Western Michigan. And we will follow that game. Obviously, one of the best programs on the planet for college hockey. So look forward to having that like we do many, many Fridays here on the Fan. Take on the Western Michigan Broncos. You don't have to root for those Broncos. You can root against those Broncos. That's fine.
Do we want to cheer for these ones, though, too?
No. You don't even know where they're at.
No, I'm saying the Denver Broncos.
Oh, yeah, you do. Stop it.
Do we, though?
Yes, you do. Absolutely, you do.
Good draft pick would sound really good.
This is going to be the challenge for the. You were joking about it a little bit, but I mean, this is going to be the challenge for Broncos fans. You're going to want to see Drew Lock. Apparently, at some point, you will. But this is why it's been infuriating. We'll talk about it tomorrow too. But the challenges for the Broncos and Broncos country is, look, in one way, it's totally free. If you play Drew Lock and he's terrible, then you get a better draft pick. And if Drew Lock is so bad, you figure he can't play quarterback at all, which I don't know if you'll find that definitively. But if you did, then you would know that, and then you could go pursue a quarterback. Or you could find out he's good, and then that would be fun. There's no downside. There really isn't. There's no downside. You lose, you get a better draft pick, which you need because your team's bad. You win, maybe you found a quarterback.
Yeah, if he comes in and wins out, let's celebrate.
Cool. Now you got a
guy.
quarterback. You just solved the most difficult position on the roster.
And then we don't need to worry about the draft pick.
Yeah, now go get a cornerback.
Yeah.
After you get a lineman. And then another lineman, and then probably another lineman, and then go get a cornerback.
And then another lineman.
And then another lineman. Yeah. Many, many linemen. That should be the plan. I get quarterbacks, but you can sign serviceable cornerbacks. You cannot get top-tier offensive linemen on free agency. And if you need any evidence for that,
it's rare.
Juwan James is over there not practicing still, so, Vic Fangio said that he does expect him to play sometime this season, so I guess that's good. More than he'll commit to for Drew Lock, who's healthy. So we'll find out how all that goes. It's been fun tonight. Entertaining Thursday night football game. Sort of traditional Thursday night football game. Wasn't weird. No fights, no crazy score. It was like a regular good game between two pretty good teams.
I was hoping for another helmet.
Ugh, don't need that again. Goodness. Yeah, Myles Garrett's attempt to lift his suspension did not work so well. Nor should it have. We'll see you in 2020, doofus. It's been fun. We'll hand it over to our friends at ESPN. For Kevin Kistner, I'm Sean Drotar. You've been listening to The Fan late night on Sports Radio 104.3 The Fan.